Hello again. Today I'm actually kind of, borrowing an idea I saw on another booktube video from the Wheel of Tomes, and I will tag them. And I also found the questions written at lukeharkness.com on his blog. And so it's 50 book questions, which I'm going to answer and kind of go through some of what kind of I love about reading, what got me into reading, and, book questions. um, so, yeah, here we go. Number one. What's the first book you ever remember reading? I don't necessarily remember the first book I read. I do remember growing up, my dad read to me from the Little House on the Prairie series. I know, obviously there's, certain elements of that are now not ideal, but it's still an important series to me because that was sort of how I learned to love books. And, we read a chapter a night and, pretty typical, like, reading to your kids. But I do think it's such an important aspect of growing up. And I think it really does help inspire a love of reading. I know, my husband's the same way. His mom read to him. And I think when you have a parent who does that and who does take the time to sit with you and read with you nightly, it can, or even, weekly, it can really help inspire and, help you learn that books are fun and a form of entertainment, even when, if you haven't been exposed in other ways, to reading. So that's really important to me. And I guess that goes with number two, which is, did someone read to you when you were a child? And yes, I remember my dad reading to me very young, and I started reading on my own fairly young, although, obviously I wasn't reading chapter books when my dad was reading me chapter books. But, I really enjoyed that time. And obviously not only did it teach me to love books and to love reading, but it also, it's kind of an important moment, I think, as you grow up. You think of this as this kind of bond with your parent. And so I think it's not only did it inspire me to become an avid reader, but it also, kind of was my time with my dad. So, three, who is your all-time favorite book character? I'm going to say that it's Holden Caulfield. I know he's, not everyone's favorite or everyone's cup of tea. But, I grew up loving him. I just felt that, I totally related to him when I was a teenager. And, even much older than Holden now, I still relate to him and the way he sees things and his perspective. So he's still my all-time favorite. Four, who is your favorite author of all time? That's a really hard one because it kind of changes a lot. There are elements of different authors I really like. I love Hemingway now, and I didn't used to like him. But would I say he's my favorite author? I don't know. Sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't. For a long time, it was Neil Gaiman. I haven't really been reading as much of his stuff anymore. Right now, I'm really into Ruth Ware's books, and I just love everything she writes. Ian Reid, I've read, his 3 books, and right now, I would say right now, he's probably my favorite author, just because I've had such good luck with his books. Out of those people, my favorite book by them, my favorite book by Hemingway is The Sun Also Rises. By Ruth Ware, it's probably The Lion Game. Maybe The It Girl. For Neil Gaiman, it would be Neverwhere. And then for Ian Reid, it's I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Has a book ever changed your life? Number 5. Several have. And I'm going to go back to Catcher in the Rye. It's super cliche, but it was the kind of book that honestly, I think I have very bad social anxiety. I've always been very, had a lot of anxiety. I'm very uncomfortable um, around people. This is why you don't necessarily, I'm not, I'm not on screen. It's hard for me. It's very difficult for me. And honestly, you don't want to look at me. And, so there's that challenge. And, I always kind of felt a little like outside growing up. And, when I read that when I was young, it not only encouraged me to read more because I felt so connected to a book. And I said, it was kind of my sense of, I have this friend essentially in this novel that I didn't have in real life. I didn't have that sort of connection emotionally and intellectually that I had with the book. And so, it not only inspired me to keep reading and love reading and look for more books like that, but it also, essentially, I feel like it saved my life, not just changed my life, because, I think I had a really hard time in high school, and I definitely, I struggled with depression and some mental health issues, and I definitely had, some suicidal thoughts, and it was really important to me because the book essentially it kind of gave me a place to go when I felt really alone, because I figured if somebody could write that and if a book like that existed, that meant I wasn't alone. And even if, it was this man who obviously was a recluse and, was in a very different generation, and it probably would have nothing in common with in real life, just the idea that somebody could write something like that kind of taught me that there is there is essentially someone out there, and that I'm not totally alone. So that would be the book that changed my life. Genres I love, I basically will read anything. I'm one of those people who jokes like, oh, I read street signs and, cereal boxes, but I really do. Like, I will read anything you put in front of me. I don't really like romance. It just isn't for me. That being said, I've read romance novels I've liked. I grew up reading a lot of Danielle Steele. I don't really read it anymore. I find it just too simplistic, and, I think there's there's a very trope, it's very trope driven, and so is any genre, I suppose, but it's just not relatable, I guess. I find that like I said, it's to me it feels very simplistic. It's like, okay, we'll have this relationship with this person, and then do you win them in the end? Yes or no? And you generally do, and so it doesn't really. I don't connect to romance that well. And I would say probably I most love, I want to say mysteries, thrillers, but essentially I like dark fiction. I really I like complicated characters, somewhat unlikable characters who have a lot of, are they the hero? Are they the villain? I like that kind of concept. So, yeah, that's mostly what I would say I like in terms of genres. But again, I'll read anything. I like horror too. So, are there any genres you dislike? Again, I don't really dislike anything. I will read a romance if if somebody really recommends it. But it's not my thing, All right, 8. What author who's still living would you love to meet? I'm not really sure. I don't really like to talk to people. I'm very uncomfortable around people, and I feel like, there's that whole, you don't want to meet your heroes. I feel like, it would eventually, you'd have a conversation, and, knowing me, I'm super awkward, and I would make a big mess of the situation, and I'd probably be weird, and then, I'd leave, and I'd be like, oh my God, I said all these horrible things, and, I did everything wrong, and then I'd, get mad at myself and be anxious about it, and then, either kind of go into isolation, or I'd end up sending them this awkward email apologizing for being weird, and then it would just even be weirder. And so I don't know that I really want to meet anybody. I mean, I guess maybe Neil Gaiman, he seems like he'd pretty much, or Stephen King, like they seem like it would just like blow off of them, like blow over them if I like was weird. Like they're probably so used to weird people. I don't know. 9, have you ever met a famous or semi-famous author face to face? I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm an author, so like I'm not famous at all. But so I've met myself. I feel like I have. I just, yeah, I don't really. I mean, I've met people that that are represented by the same agent, and I've met my agent, and she's also an author, and so, I mean, yeah, I guess so, but I haven't met, like, Stephen King or anybody like that, but I've definitely met people. Okay, sorry, I had to take a little bit of a break because I was coughing. Do you prefer paperbacks or ebooks, and why? I actually prefer hardcovers, and I like really old books, or I like very beat up copies. I love to see a book that's just been loved. It's got pages folded over, there's notes in it, it's falling apart. That's my favorite. But at the same time, and I kind of covered this before, is I've moved a lot and I don't like to keep moving books. And so at this point, I probably prefer ebooks simply because I don't have space and I don't want to have to move a bunch of books, and I feel like I can read more because I don't have to worry about where I'm going to put things. Another thing too is that I love using the library because it's a wonderful resource, and every time I go to a library, I'm just in awe of the fact that I can go into a library and they're just going to give me all these books, and like that's it. They're just going to give them to me. I don't have to do anything except exist to get to use the library. It's a pretty fascinating concept. But the problem is I always end up like, I'm one of those people, and I think a lot of book people are, I go into the library and I'm just like, I must get all the books. And I'm like, what is the maximum number of books I can take out? And then I do that, and then I have them for 2 weeks, and I get through as many as I can. And then I'm either reading something else or I just forget to return them. And then they just sit in the back of the car for like 2 more weeks. Or a month, and then suddenly I owe all this money, and they're the library, so they're usually like, oh, we'll waive your fees, just give us our books back. But then I feel guilty, and then, the longer I am late, the more I feel guilty, and it's just this big cycle. And the nice thing about ebooks is that you can actually, at least where I am, I know you can borrow ebooks through the library, and so I can have my, 10 or 15 books out at a time. But once I read them, I can just return them electronically, and then take more out. So in that way, I think I prefer ebooks. I think I also read them a little bit faster, but I mean, there is still nothing will ever replace just holding a book and smelling a book and feeling, it in your hands. So, 11, have you ever read a self-published book? I have, and I know several self-published authors, and I have no feelings one way or the other about self-published writing. I mean, I think there's a lot of writers who are great and who, for whatever reason, either chose to go the self-publishing route or gave up on the traditional route, or, just at that moment in time weren't exactly what the market was calling for. So they kind of took that approach. And I also think there are people that, go the traditional route that I'm sometimes like, this is awful. Why is this a book? So yeah, I have no feelings about that one way or the other. 12, what book or series do you hope and pray will be turned into a movie or show one day? I don't necessarily want anything to be turned into a movie or show. I mean, I think there's probably things that, I think the Thursday Murder Club is supposed to be, a series or a movie, and I think that would be really fun. It's not too involved, and it doesn't get a lot into like internal thoughts, so I think that might work. That's the problem I have, though, is I do feel like, the media doesn't really capture what obviously a book is. And because I like so many sort of books that are just a lot of internal monologues, a lot of thinking, a lot of just perception, first person narrative, it can be kind of challenging because I just don't think that that can be translated as effectively as I would like. I do like, like I'm thinking of Ending Things. They made that into a movie, and I think it's a nice add-on to the book, but I don't feel like it covers. I don't feel like if you saw the movie, you can really appreciate the book, but if you love the book, I think the movie is a great, just kind of other version and another way to see that story. But I just don't think it translates as effectively. 13, are there any movie adaptations out there that were better than the original? I don't. Well, this Luke Harkness person said Jurassic Park, and that is true. I don't really like any of the Jurassic Park movies except for the first one. But yeah, the book is awfully science-y and kind of boring. So that's a good one. I would say like Batman, just because the comics, it's hard to get a very cohesive story in that comic format. And I always kind of go back every so often, my husband does collect Batman, and so I'll go and try to read the comics, and unless it's, a standalone sort of graphic novel, I just struggle with it because I don't feel like it has the same feel, but I love the Batman movies. So I guess, some of the comic books, it's just because I think it translates more effectively sometimes. It's different, but 14, has a book you ever been turned into a movie or series you hated? That's pretty much all the time. I haven't watched much of the His Dark Materials TV show, but the Golden Compass movie was awful. It was very childish, and obviously I know on the surface it's a kid's story, but it's not at all. And I didn't think that worked. And The Lovely Bones, I really did not like the movie. I thought it lost most of the beauty of the writing in the book. And so that was one I really did not like as a movie. 15, what's more important to you, prose or story? Definitely story. But I'm definitely a sucker for a beautiful sentence and beautiful sentence structure. That being said, I can read sort of simplistic writing if the story is great, but if the story, is beautifully written and nothing's happening that I'm interested in, there's only so much far I can go with it. So 16, what attracts you to a book? The cover, blurb, recommendation from others? I don't know. Sometimes it's a recommendation. Sometimes it's often the blurb, or not the blurb, but the summary, this is what it's about. And I will say, if there is anything and there's any mystery, and it's, especially if it's set in Victorian London, I'm buying it. If there's a cover and it looks like Victorian London and there's fog and gas lights and stuff, just it's going in my hands and I'm going to the counter with it. It's just, I can't help myself. I love anything in Victorian London. And there's certain mysteries. If you give me enough information in the summary that I now want to know more, I can't help myself. I need to know the answer. I'm the worst when it comes to movie trailers. If they're oh, this item showed up and, there's a box left on their doorstep and, what's in it? And then that's it. I have to watch that series or that movie because I need to know what's in that box, even if that's not that important. I just cannot control myself. I need to know the answer. So I guess that it just tricked me into having to know the answer, and I will pretty much buy it. 17, have you read any of the old classics? Of course, I was an English major, so I've read all of them. I did a video on this. I love a lot of the classics. This is what do you think of them? Many of my favorite books are the classics. There aren't too many I don't like. And there are even ones that I don't like in terms of as a book. I really don't like The Lord of the Flies. Just in terms of it's for me, it's just not for me. But that being said, I like being in classes when we're reading that. Because I just think there's a lot of great discussion to be had. I just don't want to actually read it. That's kind of my Dickens feel a lot of the time too, is, and a lot of the the long sort of tomes. They're not that fun to read, but they are really interesting to converse about. 18, has a book ever scared you or given you nightmares? Oh, absolutely. Pet Sematary terrified me. I talked about this before. I also found, I'm thinking of ending things, incredibly frightening and just unnerving. And, obviously how it ends is kind of different. But I couldn't stop reading it because I just felt uncomfortable. And just, one, I needed to know what was going to happen, but it's just the whole thing has this mood that made me feel just, like off kilter. 19, are there any books that are really popular but you dislike? I mean, there are definitely some. I'm not going to really say which ones they are, because I do feel like I don't want to, I don't judge other people's reading habits, and, they can love a book that I hate. And sometimes, I can have a really good conversation with someone about a book that I haven't personally found a connection to, but they have. And, I really don't want to kind of say like, oh, anybody who reads this or this book was awful. I just don't think any book is awful if somebody likes it. If it connects to somebody, I feel like any book is good. I mean, there are books I haven't enjoyed reading that are very popular, but I'm not going to judge them or talk about that. 20, are there any books that are considered terrible but are your secret pleasure? I don't know. I mean, I think, I guess, my favorite, like one of my favorite things is like cheesy 90s teen horror. So like the Fear Street books, Christopher Pike. I don't know that they're terrible. I mean, they're obviously very simplistic. They're written, for teenagers. They're not even written like young adult literature today. I mean, they're just very, very simplistic, and they're just a basic step up from, the Goosebumps and like Spooksville series. But I love them, and, I don't really care. And also like those choose your own adventures and stuff, but I don't really know that they're terrible. I mean, they're just written for a younger audience than me, and I'm still reading them and I don't care. 21, what's your favorite book cover? Oh, that's a tough one. I really do love the classic Great Gatsby cover, with the eyes. That's a really nice one. But, people have a lot of different covers, so it's hard to really say, what has a good cover, because there's different covers, obviously, for different publications, different regions. The paperback and the hardcover sometimes have different covers. Some of Stephen King's old ones had some really cool covers. His Pet Sematary one. I think when it comes to covers, like, I'm way more interested in like comic book covers. Obviously, because that's like it's art, in a different way. I mean, not that book covers aren't, but I mean, you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover. You can judge a comic book by its cover. So, and cover art is a huge selling point in comics. So I would probably say, I don't really have a favorite necessarily in the book realm. 22, do you prefer old books or new ones? I prefer books. I don't really care. I love classics. I love things all the way back to, medieval literature, and I love things that came out this week. So I have no preference. 23, what was your favorite book when you were a child? I mean, obviously, like, I have a personal connection to the Little House series, because of, reading with my dad. I loved Bunnicula. So if you haven't read Bunnicula, it's fun. It's fantastic. It was a great read. I loved Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys when I was young. Before that, I liked Harold and the Purple Crayon and the Velveteen Rabbit. So, a lot of those kind of books. How many books do you read a month? I mean, it really depends on where I am, in my reading. Sometimes I'll go I'll have a slow year where I'll only read, a handful of books, and then, I'll read 10 books in a month. And it also depends on the length of the book. I mean, obviously, like, I have The Secret History right now, and at some point I'm going to get to that, and that's a lot longer than, a lot of the sort of easy, sort of fun, light, pulpy kind of horror or mysteries that I'm reading. So it's going to vary. And 25, I'm going to stop here so that I can do like a second part, because obviously this is taking a long time. So 25, and then I'll do a part 2. Would you like more time to read books? I mean, obviously, like sometimes I feel like I need like another global pandemic, because I don't feel like I utilized my time as well as I should have during COVID. I need all that time to just catch up on, TV and books and comic books and movies and like video games. Like, look at so many forms of entertainment. And I just feel like, there's not enough time in the day to do even 1% of what I want to be doing. So, yeah, absolutely. Of course, I would love more time to read books. I wish I could just like read books for a living. So that was part 1, and I'll come back with part 2. And hopefully this was interesting and you get to know a little bit more about me. All right. Bye.